Hello there. Families and friends are the theme of some very amusing stories told by my guests today.
I come from a working class family, you know, and I'm very, very proud of it. They haven't done much work lately, though. And I live with my grandmother and my grandfather and my uncle and auntie. It was lovely, nice family atmosphere, you know. We were a real family, like what's going out of fashion. And I remember my Auntie Eileen was very pretty. Her name was Auntie Eileen, very pretty girl she was. And there was a sergeant kid from the Royal Ulster Rifles who used to come and court her at night. And we were in this married quarters lines. And he's an Irish fella with big staring eyes. And I didn't know it. He had 2 or 3 false teeth up here. I never knew that, but that comes in the story. Anyhow, my Uncle Hughie bought a ukulele thing. It was very popular in those days. And it wasn't loud enough. So he went to the toilets. We had these old-fashioned toilets with a wooden top on, you know, the old enamel pose, see? And he took the top off this pole and screwed it onto the back of the ukulele. He said it was a good resonator. So anyhow, I was only 7 and I learnt to strum this thing, you see, this ukulele. Unfortunately, it had been soaked in creosote, you know. So in the hot weather, when you were playing it, suddenly this terrible smell used to come up like this. And I used to wonder when I used to play this, people would move away from me. And I thought I was a bad player. So I used to sit in the garden on my own at night and practice it. Well, one night I went out there and my Auntie Eileen was sitting in a chair. It was moonlight in India, very romantic. And this sergeant was kneeling down like this. I'd never seen romance before, you know. He was doing this with it. And he was doing all this kissing up the arm, see? So I was strumming this ukulele and I was playing, I remember a song by Irving Berlin called I'll Be Loving You Always. Remember it? Right. So I was playing this to myself and he started to sing it. I was this side of the fence and he was that side, right? So I couldn't see him, so he shouted out, play that again, will you, son? So I was playing this, and he started singing, I'll be loving you always. Then he got stuck on a note, he said, can you put that down half a tone, son, right? So this is how it ended. I was playing this thing, this my auntie told me this. He was singing this song to her, like, I'll be loving you always. And my Auntie Eileen was watching this mosquito flying round, you see, round his face, and it suddenly landed on his cheek, and she went, and his 2 teeth flew out.
I used to go to my great-uncle's house, which was a grand merchant house in Liverpool. And you walked through the door, and you were right back in the 19th century. On one side of you was a glass case full of English mammals stuffed during summer, and on the other side a glass case of English mammals stuffed during the winter. I mean by a taxidermist, of course, or taxidermist, yes. And then you went into the sitting room, and there was my great-uncle Bill, who was by this time of some age, sitting in front of the fire. He was not a well man. He never had been, which is why he lived longer than anyone else. And he used to sit there, smoking one Egyptian cigarette after another in a long holder. And he just used to lean forward when he'd finish and go, and it would float out of the end into the fire. And he'd sit back again. He said very little. He was interested in very little. He disliked eating anything sweet. He had something wrong with his taste buds. On the other hand, he was also too weak to carve. So very cruelly, they made him serve out the puddings, which were always very elaborate. He hated them. He used to serve them out like this, the look of total nausea on his face. And he used to look up and say in a curious sort of half Lancashire accent that they all had at that generation, anybody want any of this muck? Well, he had curious tastes. He'd trained in Berlin as a zoologist, as a young man, and in consequence was keen on zoology, or vaguely keen on it. He was an early cineast. He had a camera that used to take pictures, very bad. One had to sit through them after dinner. There was one which was totally impenetrable. He used to say, there's some owlets. He climbed up a tree and took some owlets with his primitive equipment. It was known in the family as owls in a fog. But his great treat for us was to show us an absolutely terrifying mousetrap that he'd bought in Berlin in his youth. It was in the form of a church. I mean, a model church. The mouse went in through the church door. It trod on a spring which dropped the door behind it. It ran up a passage attracted by the smell of cheese. It climbed up a ladder inside the tower. It saw a piece of cheese at the end of a small corridor there. It ran towards it. A trapdoor dropped, and it fell into a tin bath of water in which it swam until it drowned. I mean, at the time, I thought nothing of it. But speculating about it since, I cannot believe that anyone actually could create such a horrible machine. As he used to explain, the great advantage is the other mice can't smell the mouse that's dead, you see, because it's drowned instead of being caught in the trap. So you can get as many as 6 or 7 in the morning and all drowned. The idea of them swimming around all night slowly drowning inside this church building was something that struck me as horrific now.
Yeah, well, my mother was a very, very kind person, inasmuch that everybody, they'd knock at the door, knock, knock, Mrs. Hird, have you got a cup full of sugar? Mrs. Hird, can you lend me mother 2 candles? Mrs. Hird, have you a piece of brown paper and some string? My mother wants to send a parcel. All these things happened. And I can remember vividly one Sunday, the dinner, it was the roast beef, and it was about 3, the roast potatoes, the cauliflower, and there was carrots, and all there, and an apple pie all singing on the top bit of the stove, you know, that used to be already. And there's the knock on the door, and a very sad voice said, "Are you there, Mrs. Hird?" My mother, you see, Florence Nightingale, and she said, "Oh, Ethel, oh, love, what is it? Come in." And she came in and she was crying like this, and she said, "Well, now, I must tell you that this girl had only been married 3 weeks. And for the first time, because we were at the seaside, the parents of her husband had come for the day. Now, people are always doing that at the seaside, never telling you when they're coming, and coming to the free restaurant, you see." And she said, Ernie's mother and father have turned up, and she says, "We've had our dinner, 2 chops." And she says, "I wondered, have you done a roast?" Which is a lovely way to speak Lancashire. Have you done a roast? Not have you roasted it? And my mother said, "Oh, love." But she said, "I wondered if you could just let me..." And my mother said, "Wait a minute." I'd got the black Japan tray. I could see all this now as I tell it. Put the black Japan tray there. All the veggies were keeping hot in the tureens there. Puts them all on the tray, puts the roast on the dinner plate, puts the gravy in the thing there, puts the apple pie jigged on next, glass jug with some custard in it, that goes on. Takes a spotless cloth out of the drawer, puts it over, and she said, "Now there you are, love." She said, "And go out the back way, and then the neighbours won't see you." So the tears still coming down her face. She said, "Oh, you're good. I don't know what we'd do if you weren't it." My mother said, "Get off." So she staggers out with this tray, and the dinner goes. Now, while this was going on, my father was reading the Sunday Chronicle, which, of course, is now defunct. And the glasses have carefully come off, because he's listening to all this, you see. And then he's heard plop, one thing go on the tray and another go on the tray, you see, and out she goes, and that's it. Then my mother is in the kitchen and she's singing, "Oh, Where Is My Boy Tonight?" which was a song she often sang. She was a bit embarrassed, you see, so she said, "Oh, where is my boy tonight? Would you like 2 eggs with your bacon, Jim?" "Oh, where is my boy? Love, you like 2 eggs?" And meanwhile, my father is looking at the table that's set with the white cloth and the cruet that I cleaned every Friday, you know, and all this. And he says to her, "Yeah, I'll have 2. He says, "They'll be very nice with horseradish sauce." And it was the only thing she hadn't given the woman, the horseradish sauce. But that was my mother, you see.
Yeah.
That was my mother.
And my mother was a fantastic cook, because there had to be in those days, you see. And she was famous for making bread pudding. But we kids were up to here with bread pudding. I mean, every day, you fill her up with bread pudding. But so to get rid of it, when we used to go down the street, you see, the kids used to say, "Has your mum got any more bread pudding?" And I say, "Yeah, go on, just a minute, I'll go and get it." And I'd come back with a big wedge, you see, and they'd eat it. So she was very famous. I also had a relation of mine, a young girl, and she was about our age, and she'd had, strangely enough, elocution lessons, and she spoke awfully like that, you know. And in fact, if we were out playing with her, all the boys used to say, "Who's that there?" And we were ashamed of her because she spoke so posh, you know. We said, get out of it, get off. But you see, because she had these elocution lessons, her parents couldn't afford any food. And she couldn't wait to get round to my mum's house because, if anything, although we were poor, we had big meals, you know. Anyway, this particular day at time, my mother was ill, and one of us had to be kept away from school, and that was me. And I was doing the housework and everything. And she said to me, she said, Reggie, she said, I want you to go downstairs. She said, you'll find the bread pudding, not bread and butter pudding, you know, the ones in the meat dish, the brown with the spices and the currants, you know the ones I mean. She said, I want you to go downstairs, she said, and you'll find all the bread, she said, is soaking in a bowl. She said, I'll bring it upstairs with a nutmeg and the thing and the dish and the fats and what have you. She said, I'm going to make a bread pudding, she said. So anyway, I take all this upstairs and I'm finished. She said, come on, you can come and get it and put it in the oven, she shouts down. So I get hold of this bread pudding like that, and there was always a piece of oilcloth, you see, linoleum, sticking up. And she always used to say to my father, you're ahead of me, aren't you? She used to say to my father, for God's sake, when are you going to nail that bit down? Oh, I'll get round. She said, look, somebody's going to fall over it one day. Never got done. And this particular day, I'm so excited I can go out and play after I put this bread pudding in the oven. I come tearing down the stairs with all this gooey bread pudding, you see, like this, and trip over this piece of stuff. Never had kitchenettes, sculleries, in the scullery. And on the floor, it was coconut matting. See? Now, it's a dreadful thing to waste food, Dick, you understand? So she said, have you put it in? I said, I've just put it in now, Mum, and I'm scraping it all up off the floor. All this bread pudding, I'm sticking it back into there like that. This particular night, right, my cousin, the awfully like dead one, is coming round to have something to eat. Now, of course, she loves my mother's bread pudding, see? So while she's sitting there, my brother comes home from work, he's sitting there, and she says, Isabel, would you like a piece of bread pudding? And she said, oh, Auntie, love it. So she said, Reggie? I said, yes, Mum. She said, go and get the bread pudding. So I go to the pantry, and I bring out this bread pudding. It's beautiful golden brown. And she's not well at all, my mum, but she's right. She cuts this big wedge off like this, right? And she gives it to Isabel, waiting for the praise, you see? And Isabel said, oh, thank you, Auntie. And Isabel takes this piece of bread pudding, she said, and she said, oh, Auntie, I do love your bread pudding. She said, Mummy could never... Mummy could never make... My mother says, all right, Isabel. She said, oh, marvellous, Auntie. She said, it's just... And she keeps... And all these hairs are coming... all round the plate, all these hairs, you see. And my brother is sitting there, and he looks at this bread pudding at the side, and he see all these hairs sticking down the side. And he said, Isabel, he said, before you eat any more of that, he said, you want to nip it round the barbers and get it a short back and sides.
The other thing about Uncle Bill was that he suffered from a skin complaint, which meant that he never married, actually. He was so embarrassed by it. He was dressed from there to there, and all over he had this skin complaint. It was a nervous or hereditary thing. And the only thing that would relieve it was taking tar baths, which he used to have to take if it became unbearable in the middle of the night. Of course, he had a very old-fashioned Victorian bath with a lovely wooden bath, you know, one of those amazing baths. And he used to get into this tar bath, and he had to stay in it a certain amount of time. Too long, it would exacerbate the complaint, make it worse. Too short a time, it wouldn't work. He worked out that if he recited Lewis Carroll's The Hunting of the Snark, it was the right time for him to stay in his tar bath. My father said that when he used to stay there as a child, if he walked along the corridor in the night, to relieve himself, I imagine, I can think of a few other reasons why he would walk along in the night, he would hear from inside the bathroom at, say, 3 in the morning, my Uncle Bill reciting Lewis Carroll's The Hunting of the Snark. Just a place for a snark, the bellman cried. You know, right the way through. And then he got out at the end of it.
And really, my father has enjoyed being Alf Garnett's father much more, I may say, than I've enjoyed being Alf. I mean, he, you know, I do get a bit tired sometimes. People come up and say, all right, Alf, hey? How's a silly old moo, all right, you know? Bloody hammers, you know, and all that, man. Yes, and they smile. And I always say to them, look, it's only one of many parts I've played, but I say, you wouldn't go up to Sir Laurence Olivier and call him Hamlet, would you? Or ask him, you know, how his mother likes being, you know, seduced by his uncle or something. And it doesn't seem to work, in fact, that people do call me Alf, and I'm pretty used to it now. But, I mean, my father loves it. And he goes around, he pulls a face, he says, you know, whose father am I then, eh? He does a sort of, he's better looking than I am, and he's got more hair than I have too. And, I mean, he signed his name in the Lord Montagu's Motor Museum. He signed it Alf Garnett's father, you know. And he was having an operation, several years ago when the show had just started, and he said to the nurse, he said, he was having an enema, you know. And he said, yes, he said, you know whose bottom you're putting that tube up, don't you? And the nurse said, no, whose? He said, that's Alf Garnett's father's bottom.
My mother was English, my father was Irish. What a dreadful mixture, isn't it, eh? And he was a real loony. He always wanted to be cowboys and Indians. All the time he wanted cowboys and Indians, wanted to play cowboy. Even when he was 60, he was shouting cowboys and Indians. And I'll never forget, you know, he would say, now, we're walking down the road. He said, now, if there's an ambush now, the Indians would spring out from there. We'd take cover here with the muskets. We'd fire over there. And he'd do this all the time. It was very embarrassing on top of a bus, you know, when he'd keep saying, duck, quick, what? Watch, it's Indians, you know. In Lewisham, High Street, it's an Indian. Anyhow, we know when Crystal Palace caught fire, you know. And I saw it from the back of my window. It was 1933, and this huge glow was in the sky, like this. And my father came up the stairs, and he said, Navajo!
Scotty and I came back from our honeymoon, and in the world, in cash, hard cash, we had 3 and 8pence. And we'd to pass my mother and father's house, although we'd got our own little house. And I said, we'd come from Scotland, you see, overnight, and I said, oh, it'll just be about lunchtime. So we called at my mother's, and I think everybody knows when you open a door and there's been roast lamb and mint sauce and buttered potatoes, it's a smell on its own. So I thought, we're in. So we go in, but my mother and father had finished their dinner, you see, and I said, oh, well, she said, if I'd known you were coming, I would have done more, you see. Go to the butcher's, get 2 chops. And indeed I did. And for 10pence, I got 2 chump chops like that, which shows I've been married 40 years this year, but 10pence they were. So I went back to my mother's and I grilled them. There were plenty of potatoes left, peas left, mint sauce, we're into it. There's an apple pie on the table and a jug of custard, you see. I love custard, you know, I like it better than cream. So I said to my new husband, would you like some apple pie, Scotty? And he said, yes, please. So I cut a rather generous wedge, and as I did so, put it on a plate. My mother said, it'll be threepence a portion. And I said, oh, no, you know, clever-head. And I said, oh, no, it will, you see. And so she said, no, but it will. And I said, 6pence for 2 portions of pie. And then I'm a little bit... You see, so I said, oh, very well. So I cut myself some pie, put some custard on, we had it. And it took 7 minutes from their house to ours, and all the way down, I was terribly upset. I really mean this, and I kept saying to Scotty, my own mother, my mother that would do anything for anybody, 6pence for 2 pieces of pie. And I must admit he didn't agree or disagree or anything like that. Well, when I was in the rep, I was next door, but my husband was at the Winter Gardens in the orchestra. So I wasn't working that week, you see. I hadn't rehearsed the week before. And I went to meet my husband in my honeymoon suit, costume it was called. And we called in at my mother's to say good night, God bless, which we always did. It was a thing we always did. And she was just wrapping 2 plate pies upon the table. I don't think it was in greaseproof paper, but I think it was in tissue paper that the bread had come in. And she put them on top of each other. She said, there's a savoury one there and an apple one. You can take them home for your supper, you see. So I said, I was never rude to my mother, you see, but I said it in a nice way. How much are they? You know, and she said, just a minute. She said, now, just a minute. She said, I want to tell you you're a married woman now, and you've got to make your money last from one payday to the next. That is the reason you were charged 3pence a portion for the apple pie. Right, so we go home. So as soon as we get home, we undo the pies, and the savoury one was there, and the apple pie was there. And right in the middle of it, honest to God, so it had laughed its way into my mother's lovely pastry was my tanner. Right in the middle of it. But it taught me a lesson, you know.
Quite.
To save up for things.
So we've all fixed. We've got now fixed our honeymoon. We're going to get married. We had 30 bob between us actually when I got. And I had to draw that out of the post office, you know. Yeah. But I had to leave a shilling in, so you had to keep it open, didn't you? Yeah. So I had 29 bob for my honeymoon, you know. So what am I going to do here? I don't know what. So anyway, a pal of mine lives just outside Glasgow in a little village called Dalry. And he said, right, you can have my house for your honeymoon. We thought, this is terrific. Dalry, just outside Scotland. The day before we're going to get married, they ring up, you've got a worker's playtime in Manchester. Blimey, marvellous. 18 quid plus expenses it was. You know, I thought this will pay for me honeymoon. Great. She was going to have a great time, my missus, once you're on 18 quid for a fortnight, you know. Terrific. So anyway, we stop off at the airport hotel. That was our first night, was at the airport hotel. Terrific. And I remember going into the airport and, you know, we got all the confetti and all that over, so they know all about it, you see, and I think it's great. Fella shows us to our room, the porter, and he said, you're very privileged, sir, sleeping in this room tonight. I said, why is that? He said, Hughie Green was here last week. And I said to my missus as we walked in, I said, well, for Anne Lambert tonight, opportunity knocks.
See, I'm a big believer that the first wedding anniversary is the one that 3 weeks before. It is the wife who is always saying such things as, oh, you wouldn't think we'd been married a year in 3 weeks, would you? Or, it doesn't seem a year ago, and in 3 weeks, you see, all this. So on the wedding day, Scotty, I think, who'd been very glad to be reminded, you know, said to me, would you like a mink coat or would you like a diamond solitaire? And we were still at about the 3 8 stage, you know. And I said, daft as you do, you know. And I said, no, I have enough mink coats and solitaires. I said, but would you like a Hillman minx with a little gold S on it? Or would you like a 3 11 evening shirt from Greenwood's underwear, shall we say? And he said, well, I think I'll have the shirt because I need it for in the band pit, you see. So I bought him the shirt and I did it up right nicely and I got a card. It was threepence, a beautiful card. And he brought me some flowers. And when we were having our lunch, he said to me, you know, it doesn't seem much, some flowers. And he's getting a bit upset because he's got the shirt, you see. And he said, can't you think of anything I could give you? And I said, yes, I could. As I chewed on a chip, I said this. I remember it very well. And I said, yes. I said, you can give me a baby. And we'll make it tonight. My God, we did, I'll tell you.
My Uncle Hughie, the one who was with boy in India, he died about 8 years ago. And he had the funeral at Golders Green. They were going to crematorium, you know. And we all went in there, and we were all crying and all this. And my mother was very depressed, and he was a lovely uncle he was to me, and we were all very depressed. And when it was over, we went up to the vicar and said, thank you very much, vicar, you know. And he said to us, yes, she must have been a wonderful woman. Well, my uncle, a wonderful woman? We got the wrong funeral. We were one funeral too soon, and yet he was just coming in, he was. So we had to go in again and do it all over again.
La 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 la